Going back to your kind of algebra days, if you want to isolate the variable, you would divide this side by 30, because right now these two are being multiplied. So if I divide this side by 30, that goes away, and then this, divide both sides by 30. So then this side becomes 360 divided by 30, which equals 12. So let me put that into, so I'm going to say multiply, so asterisk 12. And now, let me zero that out. If this moves 30 degrees, so 1 o'clock, the minute hand did one complete rotation. I see a little 1 right there. So this is an accurate clock. But we didn't necessarily have to even find that answer. If it was a more complicated thing and we didn't have a calculator, we could even put in our equation. So I'm going to say multiply by that equation, which was 360 divided by 30, and close parenthesis. And it's doing the math. It's still giving us the right answer. So if you enjoyed this assignment, what I would challenge you to do is see if you can make a minute hand, or not a minute hand, a second hand. So for every 360 degrees of the minute, the second, I'm sorry, for every, I guess, whatever 1 minute is in degree terms, the second hand would move 360 degrees. And then the last thing I want to show you to kind of get us into the last topic on expressions, just some of my favorite expressions, or really this is one of my favorite. This is really the only other one besides wiggle, is if you hold option on this hour. So instead of having to keyframe, which you could set keyframes on this and set it to ease in. So that's cool. You can also add motion blur, which also I think makes it cool. But let's say you didn't want to keyframe it. You just wanted a clock that was going and going and going. So if I hold option on this rotation and make an expression, I'm going to put in the expression time. And time is just going to, here's our rotation. So if I go 1 second, it is 1 degree rotation. If I go 2 seconds, it's 2 degrees. So you have to write time with no capitals. It has to look exactly like that for After Effects to recognize that it's going to take the time value. But that's too slow, so now you can multiply with an asterisk times 20. So now 1 times 20 is 20, 2 times 20 is 40, and we get a faster moving clock. So that is a pretty cool expression to use. Well, and we might as well just jump into another way to use that time expression. So let me pause this. So that time expression is running the noise of this background. So I didn't have to do any keyframes, but there's like changes taking place. And so I'm going to delete this. Let me delete this fractal noise layer. And really we just started out with, and I'm going to hide these two text pieces. I'm going to just get a rectangle. I'm going to change it to be radial gradient, and I'm going to click and drag. I already selected the colors I wanted up here for the gradient, and if I go to my mouse tool with that rectangle selected, you'll see these little handles. So there, I will call that BG for background. And then let me make a new solid. It doesn't matter what color it is because we're just going to apply a fractal noise effect. So I'm going to call that fractal noise. And then in me effects and presets, I'm going to add, it takes a second. Okay, I'm going to add fractal noise. Yeah. Okay, so that's what fractal noise looks like by default. This is one of my favorite effects. So anyways, the evolution is what was making it move. So if we add a time, hold option, click the stopwatch, just add time, and I know that 1 degree at a time is not fast enough, so I'm going to multiply it by like 200. We get this kind of cloudy look. But this is one of my favorite effects because, like, let's say you open this transform property and didn't mess with the evolution and turned off uniform scaling. You could set the scale width to like 1 and the scale height to like 1800, and then turn down the contrast and all of a sudden you got something that looks like brushed steel. So let's reset it. You could also go to block and adjust the rotation, which is what I did in the original example. And then I believe our evolution is still set up. So that looks cool. So anyways, there's people use this effect for so many weird and different things, including like Andrew Kramer on Video Copilot uses this effect to make like solar flare burst. There's just so much you can do with it. So anyways, to get that final effect, I think I set mine to add. And if you just want to experiment by going through the modes, you can hold shift and then the plus button at the top of your keyboard, or the minus button to go back. So add is too bright. I'm going to hit T to open the transparency and just bring that transparency down. And then I have this kind of nicely animated background with the time expression. And then if I bring on my text above it and turn it on, oh yeah. Okay, and then just so we know time, we know wiggle, we've done some like rotation expressions, or where you like link one parameter to another multiplied by something. The last thing is just, let me turn off, this ball bounces continuously, but it's really only 3 keyframes that are driving that ball, but they go on forever. And I don't know how to write the expression, but After Effects has some helpful ways to do it. So let's just make a new composition. I'm going to call it ball tut. Here's this. I'm going to give it a solid. And if the origin point, I'm going to put it, it doesn't matter. So, and I'm going to just make it bounce on the bottom of this composition. So let's set a keyframe right where it is. I'm going to go ahead 5 frames or so, move it down so it's like touching. Go ahead 5 frames and then move it back up. Or no, I'm not going to move it back up. I'm going to copy that original keyframe. So click the keyframe, Command C, Command V, and maybe I'll move that keyframe 1 bit. So now it starts and ends at the exact same point because I just copied that keyframe. So what if you wanted this to go on forever? You could, I guess, copy these keyframes, but it starts to get messy when you're doing a lot and just, you know, looking at all the keyframes for infinity just doesn't look that great. So an expression is, once you have those keyframes set, hold Option, click the stopwatch, even though it was already set, and it opens our expression where we can write stuff. But there's also this little play button. And there's a lot of choices in here, and you can start learning about the language of, you know, expressions and Java and After Effects. But if you go to the Property tab, choose Loop Out. It's kind of in the middle, and it has a number of keyframes. So what Loop Out does, right now I don't think it's gonna, well, maybe if you set it to 0, it just does all the keyframes. But if you had like, if this number, you know, I have 3 keyframes, but if it was set to 1, it won't look right. But because there's 3, I should set that to 3. And then we have this ball that bounces indefinitely. Of course, it looks horrible. So the cool thing is I only have to edit these 3 keyframes now. So I'm going to like use my easy ease, which will start giving it a better look. And then go to the graph editor. And, you know, just have it accelerate. Anyways, these are kind of like extra, just to, this isn't really necessary, the graph editor. But now you can see I got a totally different look where, yeah, and it continues forever. So what does loop out mean? Loop out means after your 3 keyframes, it'll go on forever. So if your 3 keyframes are over here, nothing will happen until the keyframes happen. You can also set, you can delete that, and let's hold Option. There's also property loop in, and I'm going to do the first one, which has a number of keyframes. I'm just going to type in 3, and then it'll loop until you get to that final keyframe. and just go on. So that's about as much as I know and use commonly with keyframes. As I said before, you know, it's good to do a Google search if you're trying to do something specific and see if somebody wrote an expression, which you can just copy and paste into here. And I said keyframes, but expressions. This is about as far as I go. But I'm going to paste some links into the bottom that I think are, or at least one that's a really good tutorial that will let you take your expressions a little farther and build a cool bouncing ball tool where however high the ball bounces, its shadow will shrink. And if this is something that you're into, I think it's worth pursuing.